I enjoy making videos talking about fake gurus, scammers, Ponzi schemes, and professional athlete finances. The other day, Bernie Madoff, the king of the modern day Ponzi scheme, passed away in prison, and of course, many news outlets wrote stories about him. But there was one story that included reference to the craziest contract in MLB history and how Bernie Madoff was the reason for it. On April 14, 2021, Bernie Madoff passed away while incarcerated in Butner, North Carolina at the age of 82. His death was newsworthy because it helped close the book on one of the most sociopathic fraudsters who ever lived.
He even came out and told me that he didn't understand why people were mad at him because he was making the money. And he wasn't. I don't know the definition of sociopath, but he certainly struck me as one.
Some estimates have his Ponzi scheme at $65 billion. Some estimates have losses totaling $12 to $20 billion for the thousands of investors who invested into the scheme. Bernie founded a penny stock brokerage in 1960, marking the beginning of a long career on Wall Street.
He opened his doors in 1960. He built a very successful OTC, over-the-counter stock trading business as a one-man show. It was a high-risk, very speculative, very fast market.
Initially, Madoff's firm made markets, quoted bid and ask prices, via the National Quotation Bureau's pink sheets. Bernie was a smart dude who understood the stock market well. In order to compete with firms that were members of the New York Stock Exchange trading on the stock exchange's floor, his firm began using innovative computer information technology to disseminate its quotes. After a trial run, the technology that the firm helped to develop became the NASDAQ. Bernie was a prominent figure on Wall Street for decades, which made recruiting for his scheme much easier. In the 1980s, Madoff's market maker division traded up to 5% of the total volume made on the New York Stock Exchange. Madoff was the first prominent practitioner of payment for order flow, paying brokers to execute their clients' orders through his brokerage.
Madoff's business was split into distinct parts. One was a market-making operation that brokers used to buy and sell stock, the firm profiting from making the transactions. Another part was overseen by Madoff himself, supposedly investing money on behalf of private clients.
Now that we have an idea of what operation Bernie was running, let's see how he was able to create the scheme. Bernie claims the fraud began in 1991, even though many believe that the scheme began even earlier. From his connections on Wall Street and his reputation from his position as chairman for NASDAQ, Bernie had access to thousands of investors. He was seen as a very intelligent guy and had decades of experience running a legitimate market maker business. Investors were willing to invest their money into his fund because he was seen as a market genius. That reputation continued to grow as initial investors were seeing really high returns. During the entire life of the Ponzi scheme, Bernie never invested any of the money. He deposited all of the money into his Chase business account. Given how much Bernie had in cash while the Ponzi scheme was operating, I can guarantee that he had account managers dedicated to his business account within Chase. I know it's none of their business, but shouldn't some red flags be raised when you have a guy claiming to be a world-renowned trader holding billions in cash? Madoff admitted during his March 2009 guilty plea that the essence of his scheme was to deposit client money into a Chase account rather than invest it and generate steady returns as clients had believed. When clients wanted their money, I used the money in the Chase Manhattan bank account that belonged to them or other clients to pay the requested funds, he told the court.
Madoff turned to feeder funds, larger groups of individual investors that would pool their money for the fund to invest. Some of the feeder funds turned over all their cash to Madoff, unknowingly fueling his Ponzi scheme and giving him the means to pay out earlier investors.
Bernie's scheme was so successful because he targeted pension funds, charities, and many investment groups that wanted to hold their money in a fund long term and had no aspiration of retrieving their initial investment money back in the short term. A Ponzi scheme can only work as long as investors don't ask for their money back. The scheme operates well when new investors are piling in and the initial investors just want their return. It's easy to operate a Ponzi scheme when new investors are entering into the scheme. On a side note, the way banks operate is similar to a Ponzi scheme. If everyone who deposited money into their local bank showed up at the front door asking to withdraw their money, the bank doesn't have it. It's called a bank run. Interesting to think about. To show you how easy it is for a Ponzi scheme to get out of control, I'm going to start a Ponzi scheme to get rich enough to buy some Dogecoin. To make the numbers easy, the buy-in to Cornelia Investments LLC is $10,000. I will promise a 12% return, which is $1,200 per year, broken down to $100 per month. I receive $30,000 cash from the first 3 investors. My monthly debt service is only $300, but I have $30,000 in cash. After 1 month, I'm down to $29,700 in cash after paying the returns. Because the first 3 investors are happy and posting testimonials on Instagram, I recruit 6 new members, which is $60,000 cash into my scheme. My monthly debt service only goes up by $600. I now have nearly $90,000 in cash and only have to pay out $900 per month. Here's the crazy thing about a Ponzi scheme. Even if the operator has the worst intentions, it can still work. Let's say you have a cash flowing business, you know how to flip houses, or you understand the crypto world as well as the kids on TikTok. A Ponzi scheme can actually just turn into an unsecured loan that makes you money. Imagine convincing a few investors to invest $1 million into your Ponzi scheme and you time the market perfectly for one of these altcoins that blew up. You could have made $50 million and paid them back with new investor money. As you're probably thinking to yourself, is there a way to open a fund, time the market of an altcoin in the crypto space perfectly, make 10,000% returns, and operate a Ponzi scheme successfully? Here's why Ponzi schemes will eventually fail. Greed is the most important characteristic with Ponzi schemes. They cannot exist without immense greed from both the operator and the investors. The operator generally needs to be a sociopath who feels no empathy towards stealing money from prospective investors, and the investors need to be chasing higher than normal returns. In the Bernie Madoff scheme, investors were receiving unsustainably high returns year after year and never raised questions about the potential of a fraudulent investment scheme. It all comes crashing down when investors want their money back, like what happened in 2008 when the economy collapsed. There are real estate investors, business operators, watch or car investors who can make ridiculous returns because there are plenty of marketplaces that aren't efficient. The stock market is an efficient market, and there's no way to make 20% returns or better year after year. It just doesn't happen. Investors chasing after outsized returns allow greed to dictate their decision making, which can get you in trouble when you overlook the actual investment. Speaking of greed, it's now time to merge this story with the sports world. From the years 1980 until 2002, Fred Wilpon served as president and co-owner of the New York Mets. In 2002, his family purchased a 50% stake in the Mets for $391 million. What I learned this week is that Wilpon and his brother-in-law Saul Katz, who is also a co-owner of the Mets, were tangled in the Bernie Madoff scheme and potentially lost millions of dollars from their trusted financial advisor. Because of the high returns they were making investing in Bernie Madoff's scheme, they made a decision that still pays a former player over $1 million every single year until 2035. That player is Bobby Bonilla. Bobby Bonilla had a great professional career highlighted by his 6 trips to the All-Star game. By the 1999 season, Bonilla's best days were behind him, but the Mets had an interest in him returning to the Big Apple. His contract for the season was $5.9 million. I want you to remember that number, $5.9 million for one season. Fred Wilpon, remember the New York Mets owner, was investing with Bernie Madoff and was making a lot of money. He had the genius idea of deferring Bobby Bonilla's contract until future years because he wanted the $5.9 million in his pocket today to put into Madoff's fund. It's estimated that Wilpon, his Sterling Equities partners, his family, maybe even his dog, had upwards of 500 accounts with Bernie Madoff. 500 accounts. Wilpon and Bonilla came to an agreement that the Mets will pay Bobby Bonilla $1 million every year from 2011 until 2035. Remember, it was the year 1999. Wilpon figured he could make crazy returns with the $5.9 million, and when 2011 rolled around 12 years later, he could easily pay Bobby Bonilla's $1 million salary with the profits. When the entire scheme crumbled, Wilpon was left with a contract that he had to perform on that still looks insane to this day. Every single July from 2011 till 2035, Bobby Bonilla receives a check from the Mets for over $1.2 million. 25 years of $1.2 million, is $30 million. Bobby Bonilla's 1999 season made him $30 million. For reference, Michael Jordan's salary with the Bulls the year before was $33 million. Greed is what drove this contract. Wilpon, or whoever decided to pay Bobby Bonilla, was driven by greed. Imagine the owner of your favorite sports team paying a player 5 times their market rate because they want to invest that money in their friend's fund that is most likely a Ponzi scheme. At least Mets fans are now rejoicing with new ownership. But they can't fully rejoice because every July until 2035, they will be celebrating Bobby Bonilla Day and will be reminded of how insane that contract is. To make the story even more interesting, the Mets owners were in financial trouble after the Madoff scheme was uncovered. Check this out. Soon after Madoff was arrested and the financial reckoning became apparent, Wilpon and Katz came to the realization that they would have to sell off a significant portion of the team to remain solvent. But Jeff Wilpon, Fred's son, and the chief operating officer of the Mets wanted to forge ahead and retain full ownership by borrowing money to offset the sudden liquidity problem. Major League Baseball helped out with a $25 million loan, reported in 2011, to cover operating costs, but it was not enough. The owners of a professional baseball team in New York City had to get bailed out by the MLB because of their poor decision making. They needed loans to pay their players' salaries. When Steve Cohen bought 95% of the Mets in 2020 for $2.4 billion, the Wilpons made only $2 billion on the sale and retained 5% ownership, which is still $120 million. Just a reminder that you can make terrible financial decisions, be incompetent at running a professional baseball organization, get entangled with the biggest Ponzi scheme, and still 6x your money if you just work hard. Wealth has nothing to do with luck and timing. Hope you enjoyed the video. I found this entire story fascinating, and I hope you did too. Thanks for watching.